And what you just heard was one of the many amazing songs from Blazing Lazers. This next topic is going to be about Blazing Lazers, the Turbo Grafx game. Jose and I were both playing it. We're going to go into a little history about that, a little personal history about the game also. And then eventually we're going to give you our opinion and thoughts about this amazing video game that came out. So let me start out by going over a little history about Blazing Lazers, the game. Now, Blazing Lazers is a top-down shooter that was released in Japan and in America in 1989. Now, in Japan, it was released, I believe, in July of 1989. In America, it was released in August of 1989. The reason why that date is special is because in August of 1989, the Turbo Grafx was also released. So Blazing Lazers had the same release date as the Turbo Grafx. Of all the games that could have been released on that date, this game was a fantastic choice for NEC to choose to release. Now, the game was developed by a company known as Compile. The game was directed by Masamitsu Mu Nitani, who was the president of Compile, and he also created Zanuck, The Guardian Legend, and the Puyo Puyo series. It was also created by Mikio Uyama, director of the Super Bomberman series for the Super NES, and Tadayuki Kawada, who is designer of the Super Famicom game known as Do-Re-Mi Fantasy. Now, Compile, as I stated, is best known for Puyo Puyo, but there are also these other good games that were released. Now, Puyo Puyo right now is currently out, I believe, on the SNES or the SNES collection on the Switch. That's more like a Tetris style game. Now, that has nothing like Blazing Lazers. The other game was Super Bomberman, also a fantastic game. I believe that's still around, that franchise. Again, nothing like Blazing Lazers, but there's another game that I mentioned here that was created by Masamitsu Nitani, and that is The Guardian Legend. The Guardian Legend was out for Nintendo, and it was a top-down shooter as well as a side-scrolling game. Now, that top-down shooter aspect, you could see slowly evolve into what we now know as the game Blazing Lazers. Now, furthermore, it was created by Compile, but it was also published by Hudson Soft. At the time, 1989, up until maybe 1993, 94, Hudson Soft was a powerhouse company when it came to gaming. They put most of their efforts into the Turbo Grafx games, also known as the PC Engine games, also known as the PC Engine in Japan, but they put so much of the resources into the Turbo Grafx. If there was a Turbo Grafx game, it was more likely than not you would see that little B logo, which was Hudson Soft, on that video game. So again, this was published by them. And let me describe. I do have the booklet for Blazing Lazers. Let me describe what this game is, so everybody understands. Well, let me not describe, but let me tell you what the story is behind Blazing Lazers. Dark Squadron, dead ahead. Get to your battle station, space jockey. You're in for the fight of your life in this, the ultimate outer space shoot 'em up, Blazing Lazers. Seated at the helm of 80 tons of awesome firepower, a gunhead starfighter. You just run into the ruthless Dark Squadron, dangerously close to the Earth. They threaten to destroy the world with 8 super weapons. Only you and your starfighters' blazing lasers and bombs stand between them and certain destruction. Plan your strategy and power up with the 8 different enhancements that appear. You'll need more than straight shooting to fight your way out of this one. All right, that's pretty basic. There's not much to that, but there is something that I said here that I never noticed until I did a little research into the history. Let me read this one more time. Seated at the helm of 80 tons of awesome firepower, a gunhead starfighter. That word, gunhead. Now, when I was a kid, I had no clue why they named it a gunhead, but I found out the reason is that when this game was released in Japan, it was a tie-in to a movie known as Gunhead. And this was only released in Japan. It was a movie. If you look at the previews, it looks a little bit like Terminator or Alien, but it's about a ship, about some mech ship in a futuristic city. Now, this was eventually released in America, but not until decades later. It is a very corny looking movie, but again, Blazing Lasers. Now, again, I must also add, in Japan, it wasn't called Blazing Lasers. It was actually called Gunhead. So, Gunhead in Japan, Blazing Lasers in America. Again, it was a strangely a tie-in to this movie. Now, let me also, while we talk about Gunhead, let me tell you what this prologue, so you can get an idea how unusual it was that this was a tie-in, because nobody knew. But let me give you the prologue for this movie known as Gunhead. In the early 2030s, a new material called Tex-Mexium. I can't believe they called it Tex-Mexium. That's my family. Maybe it's we're all Tex-Mexes. I guess in the future we create the superpower. So a new material called Tex-Mexium, more powerful than nuclear energy, enabled the world to be controlled by a new generation of supercomputers. Due to fear of misusing Tex-Mexium, it was guarded within hypernuclear facilities that powered every major city. Concurrently occurring was the world's depletion in raw materials to create new all-powerful computers. Conductive plastics and computer chips have outvalued gold and gave rise to tech scavengers that seek their fortunes through acquiring and selling computer parts despite the extreme dangers. During the year 2005, the cybertech company built one of the most advanced robotics development facilities upon a small Asian island simply called 8JO. Controlled by a highly advanced AI system, Chiron 5, the AI autonomously ran the island for 20 years until it came to realize humanity wasn't needed and began to use their own technologies to rebel against humanity. The Great Robot War began. To quell Chiron 5's insurrection, the Allied power dispatched a gunhead battalion in an attempt to stop Chiron 5. However, it was protected by a powerful guardian Aerobot. The battalion was defeated and all its remains were thrown in a scrapyard. The conflict never had a clear victor, but the world allies chose to leave 8JO alone. It'll be 13 years later for anyone to discover Chiron 5's survival and true intentions. All right, that seems really complicated, but I want everyone to understand, when you play Blazing Lasers, none of the story is ever told to you. So now, the game itself, when it was released, it was, for lack of a better term, because I know this is a game we're talking about, but it was unbelievably beautiful as far as graphics at the time it was released. It consisted of multiple bright levels, diverse enemies, huge and detailed diverse bosses. You had 4 different weapons that were picked up throughout the game, as well as secondary weapons or shields. You could also select how fast you wanted your ship to go. And finally, there was that awesome soundtrack. And maybe it's that awesome soundtrack is why in 2016, Kanye West said Blazing Lasers was his favorite game on the console. And also, I want to add that this didn't get past many critics, because after its release, it did receive many high scores. And with that, that's just a basic history of the game known as Blazing Lasers. And right now, Jose, let's talk a little bit about what we thought about it, and maybe your own history into what you remembered about this game.
Yeah, Blazing Lasers, definitely. If there was a video game Hall of Fame, it would be in the pantheon of games. It's, to me at least, it's one of the goats of the shoot 'em up genre, the shooters. I call them shooters. I know a lot of people call them shmups or shoot 'em ups, but when we were kids, we always called it a shooter. And you're right. It's a beautiful looking game. The soundtrack is amazing. It's a fun game. it doesn't. It's difficult, but it's it's not nothing like I don't know if you ever heard of some game called Gaiaris, which is another shooter for the Genesis, which is like impossible to beat. And yeah, nothing but positive things to say about Blazing Lasers. One of the all-time best shooters of all time.
Yeah, I mean, as I was when I was reading over this, like the history, and I played it again this past week. A few things that you notice is, well, let me ask: did you ever play Guardian Legend? The Guardian Legend?
No.
Okay. Well, you could definitely see the influence that came out of this. It is this top-down shooter. It's not, and again, yeah, people call them shoot 'em up or shmups. It's not as bad as, what are they called? They're called Hell.
Hell Bullet games.
Yeah, Hell Bullet games, where that one is just there are like hundreds of bullets throughout the screen. It's not that bad. It does get intense. Don't get me wrong. It does get pretty crazy in the game, but not to that point. The colors are vibrant when you play this game. Each level is different, and the bosses are huge. Like each boss, I mean, you've got bosses that they're huge ships. You got other ones that are, you got insects. Like there's Terex the Great, a spider-like creature that spits out bugs at you when attacking. There's literally a boss that's a huge skull, and so all these bosses, they're all unique, they're all different, all in different levels. And again, the soundtrack is just unbelievable while you're playing this. This music is just rocking, man.
Yeah, it's an amazing soundtrack. I love it. Like, if I could like hear it like in my car, like if I could like somehow like burn it on a CD, like I would blast it. Like that's how good of a soundtrack it is.
Yeah. And so, this is our praise for the game. And just going into a little bit. Well, for me, actually, as far as when I played this game, when I first played it as a kid, I wasn't like the biggest fan. It grew on me as I got older, and I'm like, this is a really good game. And I remember I got this game maybe around 90 or so, 1990. It was my aunt that bought it for me. It was a birthday present, and I believe they had it on sale. So because it had already come out in 1989, so she bought this for me, and I played it a few times, thinking, all right, it's a fun game. But I was a lot younger, getting the hang of playing these shoot 'em ups. It could be a little difficult. Going back and playing it now, it's still, don't get me wrong, really tough. This is a difficult game, but I appreciate it a lot more for what it does. And I got to thank Mona, my aunt, for that, because without her, I probably wouldn't have had this game.
Yeah, you have a great aunt, because I don't think my aunt's got me anything. And for them to get you a Turbo Grafx Blazing Lazers, one of the greatest shooters of all time, she definitely knows you very well.
So, with that said, let's talk about how each of us would review this game. Jose, I'll have you go first. If you were, let's use a 10-point scale. If you were to say, and if you could just give like a reason why you would give it whatever score you're about to give it, what would you say? What would you say Blazing Lazers is as far as a scoring game?
As far as the game, oh man, I mean, to me, it's definitely one of those 10 out of 10 games. I don't know if maybe it's more nostalgia that has anything to do with it as well. See, I didn't play Blazing Lazers until much later in life. I was already like, maybe in my 30s, maybe late 20s. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But when I was a kid, I could only get a Sega Genesis. My dad, he was a cheapskate, so for us to have one console was enough. And I remember one night, it was on a weekend. I used to have my routine where I would play, my games or whatever, and then I don't know if you remember, they used to have this one show called The Twilight Zone, like the new version, like the 80s version.
Yeah.
So they used to have like the 80s version of The Twilight Zone, and I would watch it, at night. And I remember seeing a commercial for Blazing Lasers, and I was like completely like blown away. Like I was like, oh my god, I wish I had the Turbo Grafx right? Which this game, it was definitely one of those where if I was an adult, I would have gone to the store and bought that console probably that night, And but yeah, it's a great game. Like you said, it's a difficult game, but it's not what's the word for it? It's not uh, merciless. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
not like relentless where where you just feel like frustrated and get like you want to give up and throw your remote at the TV. It's nothing like that. It's a fun game. It's like I said, the graphics are colorful, big sprite bosses. Different lasers the different weapons that you could pick. The soundtrack is amazing. It's definitely probably my top two shooters of all time. It's either between that one and Thunder Force 3, which is another one of my favorite shooters of all time.
Wow, well,
And
that's high praise. High praise.
yeah, it's a great game. Like I said, as far as shooters go, to me, it's a 10 out of 10.
And in this one, I am going to agree with you. I'm also going to rate Blazing Lasers a 10 out of 10. And I'm going to rate that as a 10 out of 10 back when it was released and a 10 out of 10 now. Because even for people who are, if you got kids that are used to playing games on the PS4 and now in the future PS5 or the Xbox, I can tell you that if you go back to Blazing Lasers, it still holds up. The
It holds up
graphics,
very well.
yeah, the graphics are still going to look good. When it's a top-down shooter, you go back and forth, side to side, up and down, and it's not like playing a game where you look at these graphics and they look like, well, is that supposed to be a person? No, you know what you're supposed to see, or you know what the characters are supposed to be. It holds up very well. It is definitely a game you can go back and say, I appreciate this back when it was released, and I appreciate it now. And for that, I would say it's a 10 out of 10 game. It's rare that I could say games still hold up well. It's as games evolve, sometimes the older generations don't. This is one that does. This is highly recommended. 10 out of 10.
Highly recommended.
Yeah. And like I said, it's got that. Again, even Kanye West himself has said that this is his favorite Turbo Grafx game. You might not like Kanye, but I've got to respect.
You gotta agree with him.
Decision. Yeah, I agree with him as far as this decision to state that this is his favorite. Now, is it my favorite for the Turbo Grafx? No. I still have other ones that I preferred, but this game in and of itself is a 10 out of 10 game.
Yeah, I actually just played it the other night as well on my Turbo Grafx Mini, and I was just like, man, I was playing it before bed, and I was like, man, I really got to get to bed. I was like, I got to go to work tomorrow, and I was just playing it. It was just that kind. It has that kind of addiction where you just want to keep playing and just want to keep going through the game. And I've never beat the game personally, but I enjoy like every part of that game that I've gotten up to. I believe I've gotten up to, like you said, that spider boss. I think I beat that spider boss, which I thought was pretty easy. I was like, oh man. But, Robert, which weapon did you pick? Do you pick when you play Blazing Lasers?
My favorite weapon is the actual laser, because so let's go over some of the weapons here. There's I believe you have your regular bullets that you shoot. You have homing missiles. You have it's like a fan that shoots like 3 different directions. They're like it's a weird looking weapon. Then you also have a laser. Now the laser, while you're playing the game, as you shoot enemies, you get to pick up these little purple gels. They're like little balls that are floating around. Each time you pick them up, your weapon gets stronger and stronger. Yeah, that's Tex-Mexium. You just made your own Tex-Mexium. Yeah, that's probably the Tex-Mexium. But yes, as you play the game, you pick these up and your weapon gets stronger. And if you pick up enough with the laser itself, you get this green laser that it just hunts down everything and just takes out everything. It is, I think it's a little overpowered, but it works well as long as you don't. Well, of course, as long as you don't get killed, because as soon as you get killed, you lose all the power-ups that you had. How about
Yeah.
you, Jose? What was your weapon of choice?
Mine is at first it was like you. It was the lasers. I loved seeing the lasers, like going because some of them swirl and then they
Hmm.
make all kind of. That for a while was my favorite, and but I learned to discover that it's like that number two. It almost looks like the Wi-Fi signal, sort of.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the other one I meant, like the fan. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like the fan one, right, right.
Yeah.
But see, what I did was, is I used to get the shield, but I stopped getting the shield and I got like my little two satellites
Okay.
on the side. So man, so I have like my two orbs on the side and then me in the middle, and I just blast everything away with with that number two weapon, which is like my favorite. And but yeah, it's that one was I just recently started using that one, but before, for the longest, that's all I would use is use that lasers that you were talking about,
Mm.
because they're colorful. They're like I said, they're it's a cool weapon. I mean, they're
Yeah.
all other than the first one. I thought the first weapon kind of sucked, but usually my weapons that I'll use is that number two and that number three one, the
Yeah.
lasers and then the fan ones.
I think those are the go-to ones. Yes.
Hmm.
Um, so as with that said, I believe Geekers Creepers then both unanimously say that this is a 10 out of 10 game.
10 out of 10 game, no doubt.
Fantastic. Okay, well, that's been our little history and review of Blazing Lasers. We hope you enjoyed it. And on to our next topic.